He is somebody students should know, but unfortunately many teachers have never even heard of Robert H. Jackson. I think the Education Initiative is starting to change this. There's a marketplace of ideas in education, and organizations that have strong education programs usually have longevity. When you educate one teacher, you're impacting thousands of students that teacher will have over their career. So we're doing this by a few things, and our overall goal is to have as many teachers teaching the legacy of Robert H. Jackson. Ideally, every teacher. So we're providing some things for teachers, including some really high quality lesson plans. And these lessons connect past and present. They're not just about Robert H. Jackson, they're about his accomplishments and how they impact our society today. These lessons also encourage civic action for students to take action for themselves and become civically engaged by giving them project ideas. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and being an engaged citizen involves a lot more than voting. So in many ways, this is kind of like a campaign. And like any campaign, there's no single winning strategy. And what we have is a multifaceted approach to promoting Jackson at the local, state, and national level. So I think the Education Initiative had a great year. And Greg mentioned a little bit about our significant progress in New York State. But this is the New York State 11th grade social studies curriculum. This is American history, North American history from 1607 to present. So that is over 400 years of history. And there are many events listed, but there are only 35 individuals specifically mentioned in this framework for 400 years of history. So you have people like Franklin D. Roosevelt. You have people like Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Susan B. Anthony, and for the first time, Robert H. Jackson. So this means that every 11th grade student in New York State will be studying Robert H. Jackson, and this has a big impact. The New York State standards are considered some of the best in the nation. They serve as models for many other schools. There are many schools in Dubai, in Korea, American schools overseas that use the New York State curriculum as their base. And I'd like to read what it says about Jackson in the curriculum. One of 35 people specifically mentioned. It says, students will examine the contributions of Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson and his arguments made as chief prosecutor for the United States at the Nuremberg War Crimes trials. This is big, and this is a direct result of the Jackson Center. We have been working with state leaders in social studies, state education department, educating them about Jackson. And when it was time to rewrite the curriculum, they decided to put him in. And they decided to put him in, and their charge actually when they wrote this curriculum was to remove content. That was their goal. It was too content heavy. But they decided to add Robert H. Jackson, and that is a huge win for the center. This curriculum will be around for 15 to 20 years. They only change it about every 20 years, and it's a long process to change it. Of course, we have our teacher fellowship, and we have some really fantastic fellows this year. And these are fellows who want to learn more about Jackson and help create some lessons around Jackson. We have 5 fellows this year from Western New York, and they're working on lessons that will bring Jackson's legacy to students. And our eventual hope is to expand this to a national fellowship. I mean, imagine one day having 10 fellows from around the country and eventually having fellows in every state who have been here at the Jackson Center. And we want to take a minute to introduce our fellows. And they're going to spend a second and tell you about themselves and what they're working on as a project. And at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Kim Joslin from Chautauqua Lake Central.
Hi, everyone. This is terrifying. My name is Kim Joslin, and I'm a pre-K through 12th grade library media specialist at Chautauqua Lake Central School. Library media specialist is a fancy name for librarian. That's what I am. But librarians aren't just the people who check out books and shush kids anymore. I'm expected to teach classes. So I'm kind of in a unique position in that I see all of these students and I teach them in classes every day. That's my job, pre-K through 12th grade. So I also get to see all the teachers in the school district. So I'm not just working with a certain grade level and having connections with them. I'm able to reach out to everyone in my district. So the project that I've been working on this week is I've been collaborating with Jen Champ and working with the Mary Willard exhibit. We're going to focus on, this is going to be a fun challenge, but we're going to do it. We're going to focus on the relationship that Robert H. Jackson had with Mary Willard, and we're going to bring it to students in the elementary school. And we're going to work, specifically I think we're going to target the second graders. Obviously, we can't teach them about the Nuremberg trials and make them understand the impact of that. So we're going to be focusing on his relationship with Mary Willard and the love of learning and reading and writing that he had, and how having someone who believes in you can make you great. The lesson is important for so many reasons, but I think that the story of Little Bob, which is what Mary Willard called Jackson, helps students see him not just as a historical figure, but as a local kid who grew up in the same area that they come from. It makes him very real to them. And that's what we need to do with students at an early age. We need to get them interested in him so that when they learn about him again, maybe in 5th grade, when they're teaching about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they remember Little Bob and they can relate to him. And we can use that as a stepping stone throughout high school to build upon. It's my hope that mentioning Jackson early and often throughout elementary school will make students more aware of this amazing man from our area and make them proud to be from Chautauqua County, because it certainly has had that impact on me. This teacher fellowship program is so important because it exposes teachers like me, I'm not a history teacher, to this great piece of history, and it connects it to what's going on in the world today. It's not ancient history, it's happening today. And in turn, we can pass this on to our students and help them make the connection from past to present. So I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been an unbelievable experience that has exceeded my wildest expectations.
Next we have Alyssa Miller from Tonawanda City School District and Wendy Diamond from Cassadaga Valley School District. And they're working on a project together. And Melissa's actually, her fellowship is funded by the Holocaust Resource Center of Buffalo. We have a partnership with them for this fellowship.
Good evening. My name is Wendy Diamond, and I grew up in Rome, New York. And I ended up moving to Chautauqua County thanks to my very best friend from junior high and high school. We used to pass notes in study hall and joke about how we would teach at the same school someday. And he was working as an art teacher at Cassadaga Valley in 1992, called me up, said, you need to get your resume in. There's a job opening in your field. And the rest is history, which is great, because that's what I teach. So I've been a social studies teacher at Cassadaga since 1993, January of 1993. So as an historian, I knew who Robert H. Jackson was, but I was not aware of the link to Chautauqua County until I went to Germany. My first introduction to Robert H. Jackson was in 1997, when I traveled to Germany with other global studies teachers from across New York State as an Armonk Institute scholar. Our group spent 2 weeks in Germany, and we spent 2 days in Nuremberg, where we were able to tour the Palace of Justice and walk through the courtroom where the International Military Tribunal was held. So you can feel the history. I really felt the history as I stood inside of that courtroom. I didn't realize the Chautauqua County connection until that point. So I am honored to be a 2015 Robert H. Jackson Fellow. And in the 3 days that I have spent at the center, I have met some amazing individuals who have themselves redirected history. And I have discovered a new appreciation for the influence that Robert H. Jackson's work continues to exert. Joe Karb is mentoring Alyssa Miller and me as we assist him in designing and compiling materials for a student-driven investigation centered on Jackson's work as the chief American prosecutor at Nuremberg and his legacy in the field of international law. And I'm looking forward to taking my Global 10 students this year into a whole new direction. I am beginning instruction with my sophomores this school year with Robert H. Jackson's legacy and the impact of the Nuremberg trials as the international community continues to analyze the consequences of genocide in the former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and Sierra Leone, and to address the ongoing genocides in the Sudan and in Syria. It is my goal to inspire my students to take action against the violations of human rights that continue to occur, especially in Syria, by becoming involved in the I Am Syria campaign begun by David Crane. Thank you so much for this generous opportunity to pass along to my students the relevance of Justice Jackson's life, his work, and his legacy.
Hello, my name is Melissa Wadsworth Miller, and I have been teaching English in the Tonawanda City School District for the past 20 years. 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to go on a teacher field trip that was sponsored by the Holocaust Resource Center of Buffalo to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And while I was there, I had experts in the field of the Holocaust teach me different ways to enhance my teaching of the Holocaust in the classroom. I was already reading the Diary of Anne Frank with my 8th graders, but after this trip, I realized I really needed to do more than just read the diary. I wanted my students to be aware that genocides like the Holocaust don't just pop up overnight. They take a long time to grow, and there are many actions and inactions that pave the way to such atrocities. And I wanted them to understand that the actions of just one person can make a huge difference to help prevent and stop hate such as this from maturing and spreading. So after that, I decided to incorporate research on what was occurring in Darfur. And in order to be world citizens, at the end of the unit, my students wrote letters to Ban Ki-moon and President Obama asking for a creation of a no-fly zone, as well as more funding for the refugees that were fleeing the violence that was going on in the Sudan. I wanted my students to learn that when they see human rights violations, they cannot be bystanders. They need to be upstanders and do something to change what they see happening. So then when this opportunity came up, I was thrilled because I found out that this year I'm going to be starting the year teaching 10th grade. So the kids that I had in 8th grade who wrote the letters, I'm going to have again this year. So it's a nice connection. And with our work on our project studying the Nuremberg trials, what I want my students to see is I want them to see how one person, one country boy who didn't have a college degree, stood up for what he believed in and organized and ran the Nuremberg trials and changed history and improved the world for my students and future generations. And I think the most important thing that I can do, at the end I want them to be involved in the I Am Syria project, but I also want them to understand that it's their responsibility to carry the torch that Robert H. Jackson lit 70 years ago for human rights. They have to carry that on to future generations. And they have to be upstanders and global citizens. So I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to do this. It's been a wonderful experience, and I can't wait to get back and share everything that we've created and learned with my students in the classroom. Thank you.
And now we have a teaching team. They're both from Westfield Academy, and one teaches social studies, one teaches ELA, and they've worked together for, I think, 18 years or 20 years, but just two fantastic teachers, Laura Wilson and Greg Reiner. English language arts. English.
Good evening. My name is Laura Wilson. I'm an 18-year English veteran at Westfield Academy and Central School. I have the pleasure of teaching primarily English 11, but I also teach all of the College Connections classes that we offer through Jamestown Community College.
Hello, my name is Greg Berner, and it has been a privilege working with Laura Wilson for these past 18 years. We were hired with 14 teachers together, and we kind of grew up together as educators. And I teach for the main portion of my work at Westfield. I teach 11th grade U.S. history, and now I am one of those teachers that has to bring Robert H. Jackson into the classroom. But I think it's kind of overdue. The nice thing for me is approximately 8 years ago I belonged to the Teaching American History grant that allowed me to come here to the Robert H. Jackson Center 8 years ago. And that's when I was introduced. I also teach a We the People team that goes to Albany, competes once a year. And I challenge them and I tell them, you have to, because he's our guy, Frewsburg, he's our guy. You have to include Robert H. Jackson in one of your answers. And so we've been taking them to Albany, so you can rest assured the kids are giving it what they got. I'll talk about the project, the nuts and bolts of it a little bit. I'll let Mrs. Wilson introduce it.
Okay, well, as Greg mentioned, the year we were hired, there were 14 of us, which is very rare in a district our size. And we very quickly became very much like a family. So it was through my discussions and friendship with Greg that we decided it would be really wonderful if we worked more collaboratively together for our grade students. And it was in those discussions that we started creating cross-curricular units where students are reading literature in my room, studying the time period right before he gets to it. So they're researching and reading literature, researching the history, and then they get a double whammy when they get to Greg's class and they've already heard it in my class. And I would say probably 10% of the U.S. history curriculum is taught in my room, and it's been very, very, very beneficial to our students. We were kind of Common Coring it before that was even a thing. So we've been doing this for 15 years. When the opportunity arose to apply for this teacher fellowship here at the Jackson Center, I said to Greg, we should do this. This is something that we kind of felt we were lacking, or I at least did. We've been studying 1930s research, turn of the century research. I do a big decades project, but we didn't have a local piece. And that really has kind of come to fruition while we were here this week. I teach To Kill a Mockingbird, and as you know, Atticus Finch was a great lover of the law and justice. And I really feel like through Robert H. Jackson, I can make that connection with my students because, as you know, he was also a great lover of the law and certainly justice. So I'm very, very excited to be bringing this into my classroom, and I thank you all for the opportunity to do so.
Before I talk about the projects, I too have to say thank you for this fellowship program. I knew we were going to be able to work together on something cool and interesting because we had to apply for the program and we got accepted. We were very excited to get to work right away. But then these 4 days, 3 so far, tomorrow will be another day, these 3 days have been, I think somebody said it earlier, beyond my wildest expectations and kind of a history nerd's dream to be talking to people like David Crane. It is just amazing to hear their stories and to take the ideas of Robert H. Jackson to realism. I guess that's just an amazing, amazing journey for us to listen. It has been wonderful. So now for the project that we're going to present. We have to bring, or our goal was to bring Korematsu versus the United States, which Robert H. Jackson gave a dissenting opinion on, completely disagreed with what the court decided by placing the Japanese Americans into internment camps. And we wanted to create, again, a Common Core cross-curricular project. So I teach the social studies aspect of it, and that's going to be relatively normal. But one of the really cool things, though, is the documentary that the Robert H. Jackson Center has really brought to light. We're getting to kind of slice and dice that into our lessons. It was kind of one of our, we didn't even know that was going to be one of our tasks, but when they threw it at us, we're like, heck yeah, this looks great. They showed us that first day we sat and watched a lot of that. So we're going to include a lot of those videos into the lessons themselves. It will then culminate into sort of an ELA argumentative essay, where the students will have to defend Robert H. Jackson's opinions in his dissenting opinion. And it's really a very tough argument. You ask a junior or senior, I work with the advanced seniors too, this question: what's more important, the protection of our civil rights or the protection of the country, national security? What's more important? You make that call. That's thinking, that's education. And you guys have made that happen by pushing it into the education world. I could wake up and answer that question a billion different ways and it would never come out the same. And to hear the juniors and seniors speak about it, so that's how our Korematsu case is going to end up. The next one is the Nuremberg trial, and I think also somebody mentioned earlier how eloquent of a writer Robert H. Jackson was. So it's an English teacher's dream, really. So that's where that fit in. It made her happy. It was all history up until I said, he can really write good. Well, he can really write good. Social studies. So anyway, thank you, Mrs. Tolson. So anyway, the Nuremberg aspect of it, this is where we would like to take the works of like David Crane and really transcend, where Robert H. Jackson's words have transcended history and place them into the modern times. I'd love to use some of his work with the I Am Syria campaign idea. Just when I listened to him yesterday, my brain was going off. Rejuvenated me to want to actually be in the middle of my classroom all over again right now in the middle of my summer vacation. I would love to get back in with a group of kids, as crazy as that sounds and as whacked out as that sounds, it really has got me pumped up for it. So that's what we would like to do with the Nuremberg trials, is to use that crimes against humanity, the fact that these people that have committed these atrocities will face justice. It may be a slow path, it may take some time, but we will get there. I think I heard over and over again, it's not going to happen with the gun. It's going to happen with the law. And as a history teacher, as a government teacher, as a political teacher, that's what this fellowship's going to allow me to work on. And I think we plan on spreading the word to other teachers that we come in contact with. So through your work, and I can't thank you enough one more time, can't thank you enough, through your generosity, you're making it possible for teachers like us to take Robert H. Jackson, not just because it's on a test, which is important because it's going to get a bunch of other teachers out of their seats and working towards it, as it should be. But it's going to allow us to spread the word of Robert H. Jackson to these kids, and the ripple effect, you have no idea. So the gentleman that was talking about education and the investment on the return earlier, thank you very much. I think you hit it out of the park. The little pebble that you throw here is going to have ripples that are going to expand far beyond you'll ever, you just won't know. As a teacher, as teachers, I don't think we ever know how far our impacts go. So thank you so very much for this opportunity.
I'll tell you, we have some fantastic fellows again this year. Jackson understood the power of education. He understood it as a student of Mary Willard, and he understood it as a Supreme Court Justice and Nuremberg prosecutor. He said this in a speech at UB he gave after Nuremberg. It is my conviction that improvement through education offers the last chance of civilization to avoid catastrophe. We thank you for your continued support of the education program.